If you can keep temperature in range, however, in a proper range, you will be able to do more work. You will be able to create greater output. You'll be able to lift more weight, more sets, more reps, and you'll be able to run further. So today we are going to focus on what I believe to be one of the most powerful tools to improve physical performance and skill learning and recovery. Let's start by talking about temperature. How does temperature impact the body and its ability to perform, including learn new skills? So everyone probably remembers or has at least heard of the word homeostasis, right? That the body wants to remain in a particular range of temperatures, that it doesn't like to be too hot or too cold. Heating up too much is just plain bad. It's not just bad for physical performance, it's bad for all tissue health. Cells stop functioning, they stop being able to generate energy, they stop being able to digest things, you stop being able to think, and eventually those cells start dying off entirely. So it's very important that if you want to understand how you can leverage temperature for physical performance, you have to understand that you have vasoconstriction to conserve heat, vasodilation to dump heat, that you have sweating to dump heat, and you have conservation of fluids in order to preserve heat. That's the most important thing in terms of understanding the mechanisms of maintaining and dumping heat. And now the most important thing to understand is that if you get too hot, your ability to contract your muscles stops. Okay? I'm going to repeat this because it's vitally important. ATP is involved in the process of generating muscle contractions. The range of temperatures within which ATP can function and muscles can contract is very narrow. Somewhere around 39 or 40 degrees Celsius, it drops off and you will not be able to generate more contractions. Now, it's pretty hot, but that temperature can be generated locally really fast. Put simply, if you get too hot, you stop exercising. You may not even realize it, but your will to exercise further, your ability to push harder, is entirely dependent on the heat of the muscle, both locally and your whole system. If you can keep temperature in range, however, in a proper range, you will be able to do more work. You will be able to create greater output. You'll be able to lift more weight, more sets, more reps, and you'll be able to run further. If not all, the NFL teams are now using this technology, as well as military uses it, and not just for sports performance, but also firefighters, construction workers, other professions where elevated heat becomes a barrier to performance. And you can leverage this to really improve your workouts. Well, in order to understand that, you have to understand that the body has three main compartments for regulating temperature. And if you can understand how that works, you can do tremendous things for your performance and for your recovery. One is your core. We already talked about that. Your core organs, your heart, your lungs, your pancreas, your liver, the core of your body. The other is your periphery, which are obviously your arms and your legs and your feet and your hands. But then there's a third component, which is there are three locations on your body that are far better at passing heat out of the body and bringing cool into the body, such that you can heat up or cool your body everywhere very quickly. Those three areas are your face, the palms of your hands, and the bottoms of your feet. Now, the skin on your hands and on the bottoms of your feet, and to some extent on your face, are called glabrous skin. That's Glabrous, glabrous skin. And what's special about those areas of your body and the glabrous skin is that the arrangement of vasculature, of blood vessels, capillaries, and arteries that serve those regions is very different than it is elsewhere in your body. In these three regions of your hands, your face, and the bottoms of your feet, we have what are called AVAs. AVAs are a very special pattern of vasculature. AVAs allow more heat to leave the body more quickly and more cool to enter the body more quickly than other venous, arterial, capillary beds throughout the body. In other words, you can heat up best at the face, the palms, and the bottoms of the feet, and you can cool down best at the face, the palms, and the bottoms of the feet than you can anywhere else on your body. These three compartments of your body, palms, bottoms of feet, and face, are your best leverage points for manipulating temperature to vastly improve physical performance. Who could do 10 pull-ups on the first set, and they were able to get 10, rest 2 or 3 minutes, get another 10, rest 2 or 3 minutes, and if you've ever tried this, what you find is that you start dropping to 8, 7, 6, etc. Now, the person might not necessarily feel like they're overheating, but the muscle is heating up. Then, with their knowledge that these AVAs, that these portals in the palms are a great way to both heat the body, but also to dump heat from the body, they used a device where they had people hold on to what was essentially a cold tube. Now, this is crucial. The tube can't be so cold that it causes vasoconstriction, because then the cold won't pass from the tube to the hand and to the core. But if it's the right temperature, it's neither too hot nor too cold, that cool from the cold tube passes into the hand, these so-called palmar regions, and then cools the core, and in theory, by lowering body temperature, would allow the person or the athlete to do more work. And indeed, that's what they saw. The actual data, the specific data, showed that subjects could do, at least the subjects they worked with, on their first day with no cooling, about 100 pull-ups across the time frame that they had. Then they came back and did the cooling. They did it the very next day, which, if you've ever trained a muscle the very next day, typically you wouldn't do as well in its training if it took any damage from the previous sessions, or you at least do as well, but you probably wouldn't do what they then observed, which was they started cooling after every other set. The person would just hold the cold tube, cool down the body after every other set, rest, everything else was kept the same, and they found that they went to 180 pull-ups, which is incredible. It's a near doubling. What about endurance? With endurance, similar increases have been shown, and the way that they would do those tests are a little bit different, and they also point to a really important mechanism of why we stop doing work at all. Your body heat and your willpower are linked in a physiological way. In other words, if you are cool, if your body temperature is in a particular range, not only can you go further, but you will go further if you want to. Said differently, if you heat up too much, you will stop or you will die. So let's say I'm running, and I'm running at a steady cadence on this treadmill, and my heart rate is 85 beats per minute or 100 beats per minute. Doesn't matter. Let's say 100, just for sake of example. Just making the room hotter is going to increase my heart rate further, even though I'm at the same output. And the brain does a computation. It somehow figures out that there's a heat component that's increasing heart rate, and there's an effort component from running that's driving heart rate. And if the heat component and the heart rate output from the effort get to hit a certain threshold, I stop. Increasing temperature increases the rate of quitting, in part, not entirely, but in part because of this thing called cardiac drift. Heat increases heart rate. Effort increases heart rate. At a steady effort, you'll have a steady heart rate. If you increase the heat in the environment that you're engaging in that steady heart rate, your heart rate will now go up due to cardiac drift, and you will quit. So Heller and colleagues have done experiments where they do palmar cooling under these environments. And that's wonderful, because not only does it enable people to go further and faster for much longer, that's been shown, statistically significant every time, but it also protects the brain and body against hyperthermia, overheating, coma, nerve injury, nerve death, and actual death. If you want to experience some of this effect without a device, one thing you could do your maximum number of pull-ups, stop, and then you could actually put your hands into or on the surface of a sink that is presumably stopped up with cool water. So not ice water, not freezing cold, but cool water. Slightly cooler than body temperature before you started training would be a good place to start. You do that for 10 to 30 seconds. Then you could go back and do your next set. You would repeat the cooling. If you're running and you're fatiguing, obviously you don't want to become hyperthermic. Cooling the hands or the bottoms of your feet or the face would be the ideal way to dump heat in order to be able to generate more output. Let's say that you are out for a run and you want to incorporate this cooling mechanism. You could take a frozen juice can, if you have one of those, or a very cold can of soda, and you would want to pass it back and forth between your two hands. The reason the passing back and forth is really important is because you don't want to be so cold that you constrict those venous portals that will allow cold to go into the body. Now, there are certainly people that are working on bike handles and that can actually cool the hands. Here's what you don't want to do. You don't want to cool the core if you want to cool the body, right? If it's a very hot day and you're going to train, getting into an ice bath first, sure, it will cool you down, but that's not going to be as effective as cooling the palms, the bottoms of the feet, and the face. Now I want to talk about the use of temperature, in particular cold, to improve the speed and the depth of recovery. Recovery is obviously vital, right? During a weight training session or during an endurance session, that's just the stimulus for getting better the next time. And if you don't recover, you not only won't get better, but you'll get worse. There's a lot of interest in the use of cold in order to improve recovery in the short term. We see this, and probably the best example of this would be fighters in combat sports between rounds, or athletes during in between quarters or halftime. That's one form of recovery. The ability to go back into the sport very soon on an order of minutes, anywhere from like 1 minute in between rounds in typical combat sports, or several minutes at a halftime, etc. And then, of course, there's recovery that occurs from session to session. So outside of the game or the match or the exercise session. And many people are now relying on things like cryotherapy, which requires a lot of expensive equipment, big, liquid nitrogen-driven machine. Those aren't so common for most people or accessible for most people. But a lot of people are using cold baths or ice baths or cold showers. And again, that's not going to optimize recovery. In fact, it's going to have an additional effect that is going to potentially block the training stimulus. When you get into an ice bath, you are indeed blocking some of the inflammation that occurs because of the training session. But in doing so, you also are blocking pathways such as mTOR, mammalian targeted rapamycin, which are involved in the adaptation for a muscle to become stronger or bigger. Put simply, covering the body in cold or immersing the body in cold after training can short circuit or prevent the hypertrophy or muscle growth response. It has other effects that can be positive, right? It can induce thermogenesis, etc. It can reduce inflammation, but it can prevent some of the positive effects of exercise. Now, it hasn't been examined so much for endurance work, but let's say you come back from a round of endurance work, a run or a bike or a swim, getting into a cool bath or cooling the palms, the bottoms of the feet or the face, in my opinion, based on the science, would be better than completely immersing the body in the ice bath. If you can cool the body back to its resting temperature by resting temperature, I mean within the range that you would see at any time of waking day, but not in exercise. If you can do that, the sooner you can do that after a workout, the sooner that the muscle will recover, that the tendons will recover, and that the person, you, can get back into more endurance training, more weight training, etc. So cold actually can be a very powerful tool for recovery, but to maximize return to baseline levels of temperature, just simply cooling the entire body by jumping into an ice bath or a cold shower is not the best way to go. You really want to rely on one of these three glabrous skin portals of the palms, the bottoms of the feet, or the face.